Hello there, good evening, and thank you so much for being part of Joy Asonye Live. Today we'll be spotlighting women issues once again here on the program. I know some people think we are overstretching this and that do not even see the reason why we have to go on and on talking about women's rights, but it is really important. From maternal health to domestic violence to gender inequality in the workplace and in several stratas of the society, women are indeed having challenges that affect them in their growth to become whoever they want to be. And those are those issues we have to spotlight. Some of us read the papers recently and saw once again, like we always see on newspapers, young girls being violated by even religious leaders. In fact, that's the one that got to me, religious leaders violating a young girl. And I often ask, beyond having it on the newspaper's front page, which is, by the way, a good thing, we have grown to a point where we are even discussing it and it's on the front page of newspapers. We had advocated for several years to also have that spotlight where media houses are intentional about ensuring we know what the dangers of this is, so that there could be deterrence. But speaking about deterrence, do we see it through prosecution of these people, especially when it is somebody that is revered in the society, like a religious leader in the case of the young girl that was raped, the 14-year-old that was raped? We've had teachers, people in those positions also rape these young girls. Are we having strong enough laws that protect young girls? That's what we'll be discussing. And when experts say prioritizing women's issues and their rights would help national development, what does it really mean? Do we are just one species in the society? Well, we'll be back after this break to discuss more about women's rights, a catalyst for national development. We'll be right back.
In the beginning, God created a beautiful world.
3, 2, 1. Action.
And that's why, at Cartoon Television,
we imagine a beautiful world.
We are not just bragging.
We blaze the trail in broadcasting. And it is about you.
At Captain TV, broadcasting is not just about information, education, and entertainment.
it's an aggregation of all you need to know in Nigeria
And around the world to create signal.
At Cartoon Television, we have all it takes to be on top in broadcasting.
Our mission is simple: to project Africa in a truthful yet positive manner.
Wait, we're coming to you in style.
Here we are, starting for September.
Look at what the facts are.
And as you say on Captain TV, imagine a beautiful world.
While wrapping up the day, unwind with the reminiscence of the day's news from home and abroad with Kaftan TV 7 p.m. News.
Good to have you join us on Kaftan News at 7.
Nigerians are living in up to 5%. Our young people, we propose the Harmony Symphony.
It's good to have you join us on Kaftan TV News at 7.
We found that the 10 naira tax is not actually sufficient.
National, foreign news headlines, Get balanced, accurate facts on the latest news in business, politics, entertainment, sports, and more. Live from our studios.
Many thanks for watching. Join us again at 9
Kaftan
p.m.
TV News.
Yes, there is news on your device, but hearing an analyst's perspective is the icing on the cake that Daybreak Africa provides. Start your day with prompt analysis of the latest news, trends,
And then you see these people, they're so agile, they can do
politics,
We have to go back to that regional system. That is the foundation of this country, for God's sake.
entertainment, fashion, culinary skills,
So first I'm going to be pouring the oil inside because
religious and cultural events amongst others on Daybreak Africa. For a rich mix of analysis on current issues, tune in daily from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. on channel 480 and 124 on Star Times. Yes, there is news on your device, but hearing an analyst's perspective is the icing on the cake that Daybreak Africa provides. Start your day with prompt analysis of the latest news, trends,
And then you see these people, they're so agile, they can do
politics,
We have to go back to that regional system. That is the foundation of this country, for God's sake.
entertainment, fashion, culinary skills,
So first I'm going to be pouring the oil inside because
religious and cultural events amongst others on Daybreak Africa. For a rich mix of analysis on current issues, tune in daily from 8 a.m. to 10.
super comfortable.
Welcome back from that break. Like I told you, we are spotlighting women's rights. Experts have insisted that prioritizing women's rights is a catalyst for national development. In the studio is someone who's doing something about women's rights, advocacy, empowerment, and so much more. She is Dosuur Tilley-Gyado. I hope I got that right.
You tried. You did a good job.
I mean, I had to browse it to see how how it's properly pronounced. I saw the Dosuur. Is that it?
So it's Dosuur.
Dosuur. Why did it sound like S-U-E though?
So I put that. Usually, I put that to just explain to people how to pronounce it.
Right.
So,
Dosuur.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe I should take off the E.
Yes.
That confuses people.
That confused me. Dosuur. She's the founder of Her Hope Initiative, and she's a women's rights advocate. She's had a sting with the music industry. She's a communication expert. She's a strategist and so much more. But we don't have time to go through all her citation. It's quite long, but it's wonderful to have you here in the studio.
Such a pleasure to be here, Joy.
Yes.
Such a pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. When we keep hearing about women's rights, it often seems that there are workshops, there are conferences, training or events and all of that, all for women. Empowerment issues, the government will prioritize women, but it doesn't seem to have impact. In fact, that is what we'll be discussing, and how we can indeed get that impact that would not just be nuances and narratives, but one that changes the Nigerian woman. Before we get to all of that, tell me about, or tell all of us rather, about the Her Hope initiative, and what keeps you awake at night when you think about all the work you have to do in your initiative.
That's a very good way to put it. What keeps me up at night? So Her Hope initiative's name, which is a very long name and complicated as mine is, Dosuur, but Her Hope initiative is called Aundugu Her Hope initiative.
Aundugu
Her Hope initiative. It's one word, Aundunguhe.
Okay, Aundunguhe. Right.
At the end of Nguhe is H-E-R. So that's her.
Isn't it? If it's not difficult, it cannot be.
It can be. It can be. So but what does that name mean? That name means God is still here.
Right.
God is still here, and if God is still here, we have hope.
Of course.
So what spearheaded me was exactly what you said. I see so many things going on, conferences, seminars, summits, workshops, and so on and so forth. But I just thought that where is the hope factor in everything? It's enough for us to educate a lot of ourselves about how to take an approach to advocacy and advocacy work. But the people who are actually victims or survivors, they need hope. There is somewhere that in everything, you know, I've been through a lot in my personal life. I'm sure you've been through a lot in your personal life. But what really keeps you going is having hope. Just an element of hope. So Her Hope initiative is set up to be an advocacy group, but at the core of it is really to understand these victims, understand survivors, and give them hope to be reinstated into society as normal people, and for them not to feel any kind of stigma about what their background or what their past is, essentially. Exactly. So that's the name. That's the concept.
It's
of the name.
really noble what you do, and all who have this high noble perspective as to how they can also add their own quota in helping the Nigerian child or the Nigerian girl child, and by extension the Nigerian woman. I was just speaking during the opening of this show, talking about I was commending media organizations. I'm beginning to see some of these issues on front page newspapers. I read about a religious leader defiling a 14-year-old and all of that, and these cases, in spite of all we do, what is indeed going on? What kind of advocacy should we take out there? Do we have cultural and norms that are too strong for the Nigerian Constitution? Yes. We have the Child Rights Act. We have so many beautiful written documents that should deter perpetrators, but it doesn't seem to end. What do you think we're not doing right?
It's interesting you say that, Joy, because for a large part of what the problem is in deterring the growth of trafficking, human trafficking, or gender-based violence in general, I don't think there's enough prosecution. I don't think enough people are called to order. I don't think there's enough of an example being set to deter people from this. In fact, there is a way that I call them pimps because they're pimps. There's a way that they're glamorized. There's a way that lifestyle comes with some sort of attraction that people who, if you were to whistle blow in your community and in your area,
your life might
be at risk because that person within society has found a way to maybe put one or two people in school, and then they're seen as doing something good.
Right.
But behind closed doors, these are perpetrators. These are people who are criminals, point blank period. So there is a lot of written laws. What we can do differently and what we hope to do at Her Hope Initiative, and with amiable partners such as yourself, is bring this conversation to the mainstream.
Right.
If this conversation is brought more to the mainstream, then there'll be more pressure put on legislators. There'll be more pressure put on the society in general to whistleblow, to sound alarms that, look, there's a pimp over here, there's this going on here and there in my community. But if we're not talking about this, if it's only being spoken about in conferences, summits, in October or November when it's Gender-Based Violence Month,
life activities,
then it's not enough to put pressure on the people that need pressure to be put on them. It's just not enough.
Do you get sometimes overwhelmed, I mean, in the course of your work, and you hear parents say, you know what, it happened, let's just move on and let it go? We have cases where religious, traditional leaders try to butt in and try to settle behind closed doors, like they often call it, and these perpetrators do not necessarily get justice, or rather the victims do not get justice, and the perpetrators do not get persecuted for what they have done. Does it overwhelm you at some point to say, where do I start telling this mother that you can get justice, just hang in there?
Yes, it's overwhelming. My team and I continuously overwhelmed as we've dived into this world of advocacy. It's a constant battle to reassure parents or guardians that there are laws that can actually protect you. There are laws that can protect your children. The real toughness is actually in working with survivors and getting them to a place where they're comfortable enough to prosecute. Right. So that is where, for me, if I, in the course of everything being so overwhelming, I find myself being called back to understanding a survivor, to getting them to a place where they can speak up, they can prosecute, because they've gone through it. They know who they saw. They know who sold them into this slavery, as it were. So I think we would get a lot more if we can, just as I said, conversation needs to come mainstream. We need to put pressure on the legislative community. Government organizations that have been set up to tackle these issues also need a fair amount of pressure at the moment. Yeah, I think that's...
So how much awareness would you say even within the women to even know what their rights are? Because we've had cases where you speak up to say, this person raped me when I was a minor, this person has raped me even yesterday, this person, and society frowns rather at you, who is the victim. And parents, women as well, who should rally round to support this victim, would also be pointing fingers. You dressed a certain way, you weren't a good girl. You know, there are several stereotypes like that follow these victims. It has affected, for some of us in the advocacy, women rights advocacy, it has really affected our work in trying to get them to speak out. Let's get justice for you. So how do you feel when women who should rally around fellow women are doing the opposite?
I'm laughing because, Joy, how do we break this down? It is a combination of so many things. It's a combination of what I like to say, a confusion of what our identity is now as modern African women. Do we stick to traditional norms, or do we take on these new influences we have from the Western world? I think that somewhere in between we can strike a good balance. And why do I say that? It's because I've spoken to a lot of young girls who unfortunately have been abused, who have gone through some pretty traumatic situations in their lives from a very young age. I've spoken to these girls who are in rural areas, so it's not as though they're in towns or cities to know about the word rights, if they have them or if they don't have them. What I find that is in common with all these young girls that I've spoken to that have suffered some form of abuse or the other, they know that there is an injustice that has been done to them. They know internally, naturally, that something happened to me that was not supposed to happen to me. So what we again need to do is again bring the conversation of rights, women's rights and human rights in the mainstream. I just don't find enough of conversations that have to do with the things that can actually save our lives being brought out in the public for people to talk about, for people. And why is it important to bring conversations to the mainstream? Is that way everybody knows that they have a piece of something in this. If conversations are relegated only to specific areas, conferences, summits, and there's nothing wrong with conferences and summits. I love them. I organize them.
I do too.
Right? But the average person walking on the streets, a young girl in Gwagwalada, a young girl in Makudi, where I'm from, doesn't know what's going on in those rooms. So it's again, important that what happens in those rooms gets translated into social media, in the media in general. And then that way, this conversation of rights starts bubbling. People then will start asking, but what are my rights? Exactly. Where do I go to find these rights? How do I implement these rights in my life right now? More work needs to be done for us to bring that conversation out to the forefront. And you're right, before we even talk about so many layers, let's even go back to the layer of rights. What are our rights? How are we being educated as a nation, as citizens, about what our rights are? So we can support the government and do that work, which is what some of our agencies are doing, like yours, like myself. But we need more. We need more.
In terms of policies and government direction, would you say it's been intentional, to get this right, like get it down at the throats of, I don't want those conferences or those workshops that gather the women again. I want one that the men get to know that at this point you are violating. We've had issues where the person is like, I didn't even know I did anything wrong. In fact, it had to be spelled out in certain areas where it's, no is no. And the person said, well, I thought she was happy. I thought she wanted it. Women often say no while they mean yes, and all that. But how intentional would you say the Nigerian government has been in advocating and ensuring this awareness is on everyone?
I'll have to answer very gently because I am not a politician. So instead of getting caught up with regimes or administrations, I can say that honestly, for me, being a woman, being a Nigerian woman, I would say that the past 2 years have been the most active I've seen in terms of what has been said, done, and advocated to bring women to the forefront of politics, of society in general. So I'd say that Nigeria we're beginning to get there. We are beginning to get there. We have not done enough. What happens is, if you have a ton of agencies, advocacy groups, and then you have 2 or 3 female senators, it's not going to translate. The work here won't fully translate into legislation. So it's so many approaches that need to be taken, and it's not only Nigeria, globally. The issue of women's gender-based violence is a global one. It's a global one. I work with the Gloria Steinem Equality Fund, which is the Me Too movement in America.
Yes, exactly.
Gloria Steinem is quoted to famously say that she did a lot of work raising awareness in other countries, and when she came back to America, she found out that
it's still
the gap was still like this. Women of color, women, just marginalized children, the gap was still huge. And for me, that told me that it's still a global matter. Exactly. No matter how we look at this thing, we cannot isolate ourselves and say because we're African, because we're Nigerian, it's worse here than it is in other parts of the world. It's a global issue. I think Nigeria is giving itself the room to grow in this capacity. I think we are pushing the doors of politics a bit further, the legislative corridors. I think we're putting a bit more pressure. More and more and more. I'll always say more is what we need. I think we're onto something. I can say that much. I won't say more than that for now.
Right.
Because I am full of hope. As usual.
Of course, our hope initiative. But let's get to this legislative. You just mentioned something very important. Even if we have this very sparse number of women, there are very many issues that there will be lone voices in, naturally, because nobody can relate to maternal health and maternal challenges
better than a woman.
It might not have that, it might not resonate with the man as much. So what dangers is it really to have this disparity, especially in our legislature? And how do you think we can, as women, one that are championing several initiatives and programs and all of that, ensure more women find their way in these important political offices?
Good, really great question. I think that we can convert a few men to become he for she advocates. But going back to the first question you talked about, is that men are a bit scared to be in rooms with women to have these conversations, because you don't want to be the one man in a room being attacked by lots of women about these issues. And you talked about men not really even knowing necessarily where they've gotten something wrong. But what we can do as a community to encourage more women in those corridors of power is, I don't know, Joy, what can we do? Do I have all the answers? I really don't. I don't know what more we can do, because the more women stand up to try and take these positions, the more we're attacked for these positions.
Exactly.
But we can't stop. We cannot stop. What we can do is open up our corridors of platforms where I seek for more women to create more platforms where we can talk. When you called me to get here down this evening to talk about what I do, I think that we can put more of those calls across it would surprise you that if women in politics may not necessarily have the invitations to media outlets to have certain types of conversations. And then what kind of conversations are we having with them when we bring them into these rooms? And then who is educating the young girls in schools to, when they finish school, to believe in themselves that they too can run for positions of power? And then I'll put it to the female politicians, the ones who are politicians right now. I think they have a sense of duty to go into schools and talk to young people, young girls, young boys, talk to them from an early age. The thing is, with the mind, if you catch it from an early age, it'll be imprinted in us, and then we will have change in our society. But if we're trying to do things only at our level here and up, we won't have that societal change, that attitudinal change that we want. It has to be farmed from young. Right. It has to be farmed from young. American soldiers go into high schools and entice young people to finish school and sign up for the army.
You see them for patriotic sake.
You see them set up a whole desk, and it looks fun. It looks enticing. Where is that happening here? Where is that happening in Nigeria? Here, it's not.
It's time for a short break. If you're a young girl listening to us, like she said, you too can do it. You can be a leader. But we have so much more to discuss. What are the implications when the women's right is not prioritized? How has that affected Nigeria? We'll be right back. This is Joy Asonye Live. Welcome back. We're discussing women's rights, catalyst for national development. What are the challenges? Like Dosuur, I got it right this time.
Perfect.
Dosuur Tilley-Gyado is still here with us, founder Her Hope Initiatives. She's also a women rights advocate. Thank you again for staying with us. But like we're discussing, what indeed are the dangers of not prioritizing the women's rights and all of that? And in Nigeria, if you look around, what would you say, how would you say it has really affected young girls, young women?
What are the dangers of not prioritizing women's rights? Is a decline in society, is a decline in development, period. Women are the bedrock of society. Women literally birth the society. So it's incredibly dangerous to not protect the very source from which your society comes forth from. What I think happens long term when our rights are not prioritized is what is happening now. Again, back to that identity thing that I say, the identity crisis. I don't know that young girls have a clear direction as to where they should go, we should go. I'm a young girl.
Aren't we always going to be?
We're always forever going to be young girls, which is why we can identify with this topic so much. Where's the direction? Who's leading us? What are their values and what are their principles? So I just don't know that there is a strong effort towards strengthening values and principles in young girls. But like I said, the identity crisis goes back to, are we traditionally African and practicing those traditional African rituals and customs and culture, or are we adapting this westernization? Somewhere in between is somewhere in the middle is where we should meet. But perhaps we need conferences about that. And then if we can actually figure that out, then we can have one voice, one message, and then we can have more, more girls who are not filing to give themselves up, give their bodies up for sex to be paid, for sex work. So, I mean, I think I've answered the question. The biggest danger for me is the decline in the development of our society if women aren't looked after. That just reminded me of something somebody said. You said the food scarcity we have in Nigeria today is because the women are too scared to go to the farms. And we often overlook their contribution to national food security, but it's in our faces. So if you do not protect the woman, men, see what's going on right there in our face. Completely.
Exactly.
The society crumbles completely.
That just brought me. But her Hope initiative has something brewing. You want to share?
We do. We are actually going to take this very topic and dissect it in a virtual town hall. We have created this platform, which is a town hall setting, so that everybody has a voice and everybody's voice is heard, and what you have to contribute really matters.
I'm most excited that it's virtual. Nobody would say it's too far for me to go.
It's too far, I can't go.
Thanks to COVID-19.
Thanks to COVID-19, we've had to be innovative. We've had to find ways to still push the development of our society. So the topic we will be dissecting is the economic crisis and its effects on sex and human trafficking, because there's a massive effect. I come from Benue State, so my state has a couple of, I'm right there in the center of these two issues that you've mentioned.
That's a good one.
The food crisis, yes, and then the hypersexualization of women as a currency as well.
We'll go for yet another short break. When we return, we'll get into these very important issues she has raised over sexualization of the female gender. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We had taken the conversation to what her Hope initiative has planned, and she just gave us a quick peep into it, but I would like you to explain further, because I mean my mouth is already watering to hear more of what it's all about and how you hope that you get attention for it.
Okay, fantastic. Am I allowed to say that you're a guest at that event?
At this point,
you
by
are
all
a guest
means.
at that event.
By all
so
means.
What state are you from, Joy?
Cross River.
Cross River. So you're right next to me. We're right next to each other. What this conversation hopes to do and explore is, first things first, the conversation is the beginning, the platform, the town hall is the beginning of mainstreaming the conversation. First things first. Secondly, we want to pull the right partners together to amplify this conversation, this message. Eventually, we hope that this gets to a point where we are interfacing with the legislators of our country, and we're pulling them into this town hall, and we're able to interface with them one-on-one.
Right.
At that stage, we should be able to see, we should be able to actually action some change for now, we're building it up as a platform. But the conversation we're having next week, Wednesday, as you're saying, is we're unpacking the economic crisis and the effects on women. The effect on sex and human trafficking, and how sex has now become a currency because of the economic crisis. It is a global crisis, so we're not isolating Nigeria, but we are in Nigeria, so we must focus on our country first and foremost. So that's the conversation. I'm very excited about it. Everybody we've invited has talked about how timely. I think your words were timely and necessary, and those two words really guide just how the attention we've gotten so far. We hope to get more attention, as I said, so that we have more participation and we tackle more real life issues. Let's talk about some real things that have to do with this.
I mean, sometimes we attend some of these conferences and then you're like, I need
what
something that really
this?
Something that I can go home and be able to tell my young girl, tell the women around me, just to change their lives. But beyond this high profile dignitaries that would be gracing this a town hall, a virtual town hall, who else would you like? What category of people would you like to be part of this?
We want the general public. We want the absolute general public. Very specifically, we want young girls to participate in this. And that was the real factor to making it virtual, actually, was to get the full participation of anybody who's on a smartphone. And we're saying girls, but it's so important to involve boys in this conversation, so that they know where they're getting it wrong from a very early age, and they're not waiting till they're 50 or 60 and then doing something horrible, being jailed for it. So the conversation is to involve everybody from the age of 15 and up, to be honest. If we can get heavy involvement from university students who can tune in, secondary school students, people on holiday now. Everything was quite timely. The Human Trafficking Day is actually July 30th.
Yes.
So that's on the Tuesday. So we picked this conversation up the very next day on Wednesday. In the town hall, you do get snippets of things that you might not find anywhere else. So what the laws are, guiding certain things, you'll get to find that out at that meeting.
Yes, often we do this and we also get young people who, in spite of it, damn the consequences and still put their foot forward, all because of the economic challenges. And you know what they say about the woman, the Nigerian woman. She's strong, she's resilient, and when she puts her head down to do the smallest of businesses. I mean, I used to do Vox Pop a lot, so I used to record. It used to fascinate me. When you go there, there's this woman who's just selling by the roadside, a street food vendor, but she has sent her children to school doing that. So yes, when she puts her head down, there's nothing she cannot do. But this also has the other flip side of it, where we are seeing more young girls accept this fate. So much so that on social media, they're proudly advertised. So how does this make you feel?
It makes me feel
shrink. I mean, there's such a time you would never want to say that in your household, but you're good now.
Joy, what's going on? Did the world change? Did we sleep too long one night and the world changed? Because I grew up in a time where you just could not.
You could not. I remember there's certain outfits you just cannot leave your house.
When spaghetti first came out, no, you just couldn't. You just couldn't. And so that's where there's an identity crisis, and that's where economic crises come in, and it becomes an opportunity for the underdevelopment of a society that is already trying to just develop and catch up with other world powers. And what is this identity crisis? It's the West. It's called globalization, mind you. In one word, it's called globalization. When one or two superpowers try and take over the rest of the world with their ideologies. So for us in Nigeria, because we're just so savvy, we're so sharp, we're so good.
Everything that's out there, we quickly
let something even sneak its head to be out there this much. We'll grab it, we'll blow it up and make it ours. But when I talk, it's like, somebody says you're too deep, calm down. But what is being taught in schools? What are children? I know that, you know, the home is one thing, but children spend 80-90% of their time in school. I adopted 2 girls. I have 2 daughters that I adopted, and I made that move because I really wanted to channel into young girls in Nigeria, if I could, 1, 2, 3, what I could about who they are as a person, how to own themselves as a person first and foremost. So I just don't think that, you know, and part of being, you know, you mentioned my background in media, music, film, and PR. My big concern is, what is the image that people can consume? So we should not condemn the media, we should not condemn the West, but what are we putting out there that our young people can consume and have a strong sense of identity of who they are, first and foremost, before you're sexualized, before you have to think of economics and every other thing that has to do with anything. Just even get to know who you are as a person first and foremost. So we lack that a great deal in our society. When you're born into our society, if you're a firstborn child, you're already, you've been told that when mommy and daddy die, you're taking over. So you've already been programmed to be something. When you're born in this cult tribe, you've been already programmed to something. When you've before all that programming, just at the very core of who are you, take ownership of who that person is. Whatever religion you follow, I'm sure that that's the basis of religion, is that you are a person, you're a being, and you have to respond back to a creator, right? So without getting preachy, and I'm not trying to get preachy at all, I'm speaking from my personal experience of losing my way in life and then finding my way back, piecing it back, piece and piece and piece together. But it all had to do with identity. Any crisis that I've met, it has to do with identity. It was,
but you could easily piece your way right back. It might have taken a long time. However, because you have basic education, we're talking about a country that records over 20 million children out of school, and 68% of that number are the girl child.
Oh my goodness.
So yes, so where do we start with such a dire statistic?
If a mother is educated, she should go on and educate her child. Education doesn't only happen in classrooms. Education happens, you know, you're called street smart for a reason, because you can pick up education from outside of a classroom. But I think that, you know, it's a tough one. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
I know.
If the economy is stable, the woman has enough time to educate her children. But the economy is made unstable for a woman deliberately as well. The economy is made unstable for a woman deliberately as well. These are the issues we're exploring in that conversation, Joy. It's a conversation about our position in society and where economics puts us in that society. If we can manage that, we can tackle the education issue a bit better, because we'll have a bit more power to tackle it ourselves. But as it is now, it is a fully male-dominated world, even in schools, particularly in schools. And then you have the issues of period, you have the mutilation, vaginal mutilation,
female genital mutilation.
Genital mutilation. So again, it boils down to identity.
The issues are
a lot. Because we're trying to practice so many things. We're trying to practice Africanism. We're trying to be westernized in our outlook. But I mean, I know I went to a conference that you put up, and there's some tribes that believe in that thing
very strongly.
They believe in that thing. So no matter how far a girl is getting in school, they're still going to pull her out to practice something that is culturally outdated, in my opinion.
Dosuur, I mean, in my advocacy against female genital mutilation, my mom is a public health coordinator of a local government in Cross River. She's a nurse, so these are things she sees like it hits her straight up. And in my course of doing this was when I also stumbled on the iron breast pressing concept.
Excuse me?
Yes. So as a young girl, just so that you don't become promiscuous too early, They use an iron literally to press your breast. In fact, I was so excited that somebody also did a report on that as well around. I could not believe it.
This is the first time I'm hearing of this.
Use an iron, a hot iron, press your breast so it doesn't develop too big when you're so young. And
then what happens to your bum? What if I'm not a top heavy person? So do you press the bum as well?
Well, they have not figured out.
Are they just going to go around pressing?
But you can just imagine how I saw it from the angle of the women trying to protect their children, because I don't want my child to be sought after because she's still so young. That's just the unconventional ways they thought to protect their children. And if you also go to the justification for the female genital mutilation, the same thing. I don't want you to be promiscuous or even want sex, and so please, that's it. So that's how we have trained ourselves. I like that you brought out that need for a balance. Should we be the traditional African women or adopt this contemporary or Western beliefs? How can we get this balance? And I'm so excited for this conference you have put up, because young girls really have to know that they can do really more. They can be more. They can really contribute to society and change the society.
Sorry to interrupt you, Joe. I didn't grow up in Nigeria. I grew up in England. I grew up with white girls, literally. I grew up in a white society. Very few black people around where I grew up. And I had a hunger desire to come home and get to know who I was. So I like that you said that even if it took me however long to piece who I was together, I did. When I moved back to Nigeria 10 years ago now, I want to compare that Nigeria to Nigeria today. And I want to say that I've seen a lot more progression in women taking ownership of who they should be in this modern world. And that really gives me a lot of courage and hope, because I throw in that I didn't grow up here because I knew that there was something seriously lacking in the society where I grew up. And what that was that strength of a woman that you find here in my country, in my home country, Nigeria. Seamlessly. But I know that when I first moved back to Nigeria, there was a real struggle for me to even integrate with my sisters, because I seemed like a complete stranger to my sisters.
The culture shock.
And I was thirsty to be like my sisters. And then I saw some sisters wanting to adopt some of my cultures that I brought from the Western world. And I wanted to adopt some of their cultures that they grew up having here. And along the line, in these 10 years, as I've progressed, living in Nigeria, getting my own self, I know that we are set to be what takes over the world. We just need to be given the space. But sorry, I say the wrong thing. We don't need to be given the space. We need to come out and take that space ourselves. So in the educating of oneself, you are indirectly responsible for educating those around you. So again,
actually inadvertent. Sometimes you don't even know. You being yourself.
No, but Joy, you have to be conscious about it. You do.
You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised what you give of just doing.
You're right.
Trying to reach your goals. I've met a lot of people say, sometimes when I have to make decisions, I'm like, WWJD, what would Joy do?
I love it. I love it.
Really?
I love that.
I know some of us come up all put together, but sometimes we are a mess, and they should know that we are not all that put together.
Right. You're very right, actually.
And when these challenges come, we all face those challenges. But we're women, we're resilient.
Yes,
we can do this.
We are.
What would be your parting words on this edition? It's been wonderful having you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope I can do it again soon.
Rest assured.
My parting words are: know yourself, own yourself. Before you are anyone's, you are yourselves. You own yourself first before you are anybody else's. It's so important to take joy and to have hope in who you're made to be. And it's important to get to a place where you celebrate who that person was made to be. Life is not without its struggles. There are some deep-rooted struggles that you just cannot avoid. But who you are, when you know that ownership of self, you'll be able to overcome a lot of these things. So I look forward to a real bright future of strong, resilient Nigerian girls and women that are at the forefront of every industry in the world. I look forward to it. I look forward to it.
Well, Dosuur Tilley-Gyado, thank you so much for being part of the program. And I saw what you did there, the joy and the hope.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's been so wonderful having you. And once again, talking about something that so stood dear to my heart. I look forward to being part of the virtual town hall. It will be a wonderful one. And I urge everyone listening to me to try to be part of that. I would subsequently share flyers in the course of our program next week so that you too can be part of it. But this is where we round it up on Joy Asoye Live. It's been a blast this week. Rest assured, we'll be back next week with so much more. Have a wonderful weekend.